The first customer of the morning wasn't there to buy coffee. She was there to return a key. It was 7:12 on a cold Monday in Aspen, Colorado. My cafe had been open for exactly 12 minutes when an elderly woman wearing a dark green coat stepped inside. She ordered nothing. Instead, she walked straight to the counter, placed an old brass key beside the register, looked directly into my eyes, and quietly asked, "Are you Autumn Sinclair?" When I nodded, she smiled with obvious relief. "Good," she whispered. "I've been carrying this for almost 19 years." Before I could ask another question, she turned around, walked out into the falling snow, climbed into a taxi, and disappeared. The key remained on my counter, along with a small handwritten tag. "Return only to Autumn. She'll understand when the time comes." The strange part wasn't the key, it was that I had absolutely no idea what it unlocked. My name is Autumn Sinclair. I'm 33 years old, and I own a small mountain cafe a few blocks from Aspen's historic downtown. Most people think running a cafe is about coffee. It isn't. It's about listening. When people believe nobody is paying attention, they tell the truth without realizing it. I've heard marriage proposals, business deals, quiet breakups, retirement plans, and more family arguments than I could ever count. I always believed everyone else's stories were more complicated than mine. Until one snowy Monday morning proved I was completely wrong. I grew up in Durango, Colorado, with parents who loved routine more than excitement. My father repaired ski lifts across the state. My mother worked as a public school music teacher for almost 30 years. Our house wasn't big, it wasn't fancy, but it was peaceful. Dinner happened at 6. Sunday mornings belonged to pancakes. Every birthday ended with homemade chocolate cake. Nothing dramatic ever seemed to happen. Or at least, nothing I was allowed to know about. There was one rule in our house that never made sense. Every January, without exception, my parents drove 4 hours north together. They left before sunrise, returned after dark, never explained where they'd gone. When I was 12, I finally asked. My father smiled without looking away from the road. "Some promises take a lifetime to finish." My mother changed the subject before I could ask anything else. Years passed. College, opening my cafe, building a quiet life I genuinely loved. Eventually, both of my parents passed away within 3 years of each other. Cancer took my father first. A stroke took my mother not long after. Cleaning out their house was heartbreaking, but it was also surprisingly ordinary. Old photo albums, tax records, holiday decorations, boxes filled with recipes my mother had collected from neighbors over 3 decades. Nothing mysterious, nothing hidden, nothing that explained the strange trips every January, until now. I picked up the brass key again. It was old, heavy. The number 27 had been carefully stamped into one side. Nothing else. No company name, no address, just 27. That afternoon, I showed it to my cafe manager. She shrugged. "Looks like an old locker key." Maybe, or maybe not. By closing time, I'd almost convinced myself the elderly woman had simply mistaken me for someone else. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. A calm male voice asked only one question. "Did someone return your key today?" Every muscle in my body tightened. "Who is this?" A brief silence. Then, "Your parents kept their promise. It's your turn now." The call disconnected. I stood alone inside the empty cafe, still holding the brass key in my hand. For 28 years, I believed my parents' January trips were nothing more than an old family tradition. Now, for the first time, I wasn't wondering where they went every winter. I was wondering what promise they had spent 19 years protecting. I didn't sleep that night. The brass key never left my hand. By sunrise, I had already searched every obvious possibility. Locker companies, storage facilities, historic hotels, even old railway stations that once operated around Aspen. Nothing matched the number engraved on the key, 27. It wasn't until my cafe opened that another piece of the puzzle appeared. At exactly 8:03 a.m., a delivery driver handed me a plain cardboard envelope. "No return address," he said. "Someone paid cash." Inside was an old road map of Colorado, nothing unusual. Until I unfolded it completely. Someone had circled a tiny mountain town nearly 3 hours west of Aspen. Silver Creek. I'd never heard of it. Tucked inside the map was another handwritten note. "Your parents went there every January, start at the train station." That was it. No signature. No explanation. By noon, I had closed the cafe for the first time in nearly 4 years. My employees thought I was taking a personal day. In a way, I was. The drive to Silver Creek felt like stepping backward in time. One traffic light, a single grocery store, an abandoned train depot sitting beside rusted tracks that hadn't carried passengers in decades. The station looked empty. Windows covered with dust, paint peeling from every wall. Then I noticed something strange. 27, painted in faded black numbers above a narrow wooden door near the back of the building. My heartbeat quickened. I pulled the brass key from my pocket. It fit perfectly. The old lock clicked open with almost no resistance. Inside wasn't a room. It was a narrow archive filled with hundreds of labeled boxes. Each shelf represented a different year. 1978, 1979, 1980, all the way to 2024. Every January, exactly one box had been added. Confused, I opened the newest one. Inside were photographs, letters, receipts, medical bills, school certificates. Everything belonged to different families, different names, different cities. The only thing connecting them was a small paper clip to the front. Help completed. I frowned. Help? What kind of help? Footsteps echoed behind me. I turned sharply. An elderly man stood quietly in the doorway. He looked at the key in my hand and smiled. I wondered how long it would take. "You knew my parents?" I asked. He nodded. "For 30 years. My name is Walter Hayes. They asked me to keep this place safe until you were ready." I looked around the archive again. "What is all this?" Walter slowly walked toward one of the shelves. "Every January your parents came here. They never took vacations. They delivered hope." He pulled out one old folder. Inside was a faded newspaper clipping. A family whose home had burned down. Anonymous donor rebuilds everything. Another folder. A young woman receives life-saving heart surgery after mystery benefactor pays hospital bill. Another. A struggling veteran's business saved from bankruptcy. Every folder ended exactly the same way. Anonymous donor. No names, no photographs, nothing identifying the people responsible. I stared at Walter. My parents did this? For almost 30 years. They promised each other they'd spend 1 week every January helping one family who believed nobody cared anymore. Tears filled my eyes before I realized I was crying. They never told anyone. Walter smiled gently. That was the promise. No newspapers, no awards, no recognition. Just help. He handed me one final envelope. Across the front, my mother's handwriting appeared one last time. For Autumn, when it's finally your turn. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single letter. If you're reading this, sweetheart, then we've finally run out of Januaries. Everything here belongs to you now. Not the building, the promise. One family, every January. No applause, no credit, just kindness. Because the people who need hope the most usually don't know where to ask for it. I lowered the letter slowly, for 33 years. I believed my parents' greatest gift to me had been the peaceful life they built, standing inside that forgotten archive. I realized I had been completely wrong. Their greatest gift was the promise they were quietly asking me to continue. I returned to Aspen before sunset. The letter never left my passenger seat. For the next 3 days, I couldn't stop thinking about one sentence. One family, every January. My parents had spent nearly 3 decades quietly changing strangers' lives without expecting anything in return. No plaques, no newspaper interviews, no photographs, just kindness. I thought the story ended there. It didn't. Exactly 1 week later, Walter Hayes called. "Autumn, I found something your father wanted you to have." I drove back to Silver Creek the following morning. Walter handed me a small wooden box. This was hidden behind the archive shelves. "It has your name on it." Inside was an old leather notebook. The first page was written by my father. "If you're reading this, you've already accepted the promise. Now you deserve to know why it began." I slowly turned the page. 34 years earlier, my parents had been driving home through the mountains during a terrible snowstorm. Their car slid off an icy road and rolled into a ditch. No phones, no traffic, no way to call for help. They waited for hours. Eventually, an elderly couple found them. The couple pulled them from the wreckage, drove them to safety, paid for a motel room, bought them warm clothes, and quietly disappeared before sunrise. They never accepted money. They never gave their names. The only thing they said before leaving was, "If you ever get the chance, help someone else the way we helped you." My parents spent years trying to find them. They never did. So they made a different decision. Instead of repaying the kindness, they would pass it forward every January for the rest of their lives. I closed the notebook. Neither of my parents had started the tradition because they were wealthy. Most years they could barely afford it. Sometimes they skipped vacations. Sometimes they postponed buying a new car. Sometimes my father worked extra weekends repairing ski lifts just to save enough money for January. Nobody knew, not even me. Walter looked at me with a gentle smile. "So, what will you do?" I already knew the answer. The following January, I quietly closed my cafe for 1 week. My employees thought I was taking a vacation. I wasn't. Through local charities, I found a widowed father raising 3 young daughters after losing his home in a fire. He never asked me for help. He didn't even know my name. By the end of the week, his rent had been paid for a full year. His daughters had new beds. Their kitchen was full of groceries. When he tried to find out who had helped him, there was no name, only a small handwritten note. "Someone once helped my family. This is simply your turn." I never met him. I never expected to. Some promises aren't meant to be thanked. They're meant to continue. 5 years have passed since Walter handed me that notebook. The archive in Silver Creek still grows, every January. One more box is added to the shelves, not with my name, not with my photograph, just another simple label. Help completed. Sometimes I stand in front of those shelves and imagine my parents smiling somewhere beyond the mountains, Not because I inherited an old key, not because I uncovered a family secret, but because I finally understood what they were protecting all those years. It was never a place, never money, never a hidden treasure. It was the belief that one quiet act of kindness can travel farther than anyone who begins it. If this story reminded you that the greatest legacies are often the ones nobody sees, thank you for spending your time with me. Take care of yourself, take care of the people around you, and whenever life gives you the chance, be the reason someone else's story gets a happier ending.